Welcome to Sounds of Resistance. The Ukraine-Russia war continues unabated with all its violence. As a result of the successful counterattacks recorded by the heroic Ukrainian soldiers, the Russian troops are gradually leaving the occupied territories. The Ukrainian armed forces, mainly Kyiv in the center, Kherson in the south, and Kharkiv in the east, have almost confined the Russian troops in a triangle. The Ukrainian armed forces had developed an ingenious tactic to regain the dominance of the region from the Russians. After months of joint work between the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, and the top generals of the Ukrainian army, a regional resistance operation plan has emerged. This miraculous operation plan was activated primarily in the settlements in Ukraine, which did not show much density in terms of population. As a result of the contribution of the local people living in these settlements, which have a low population density, to the Ukrainian soldiers, the occupation troops in this region were deported. Reminiscent of the regional resistance movements implemented by the legendary commander Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, respected by all world leaders in the Turkish War of Independence, this plan, realized by the Ukrainian armed forces, started to spread all over Ukraine day by day. In this process, in which the Russian army and the Moscow administration were content to monitor the progress of the Ukrainian armed forces, the Ukrainian army recaptured very critical areas. The recapture of Izium and Kupiansk by the Ukrainian heroes plunged a dagger into the heart of the Russian army. The Russian armed forces carried out their most important military shipments through these regional roads. The blockade of the Russian logistics stations by the Ukrainian soldiers made it even more difficult for the invaders. The invading Russian army in Ukraine was forced into moldy and corrupt weapons from the former Soviet Russia era. The Russian soldiers came to the point of collapse in time due to both the defeats on the fronts and the shortage of military resources. In a mysterious incident in Kharkiv, the Russian soldiers who arrived at the scene almost went crazy. What impressed them so much? We'll look into the details shortly. The easy destruction of some of the Russian strategic weapons in this war accelerated the psychological collapse of the occupation troops. The Russians especially relied heavily on the Su-34 fighters, their newly produced Su-57 fighters, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and air defense systems. Su-34 fighters trusted by the Russians were repeatedly shot down by the Ukrainian Air Force. These fighters were shot down both by shoulder-fired Stinger air defense missiles supplied to Ukraine by the West and by warplanes used by Ukraine's heroic pilots. The Su-57 fighter, which the Russians showed as a rival to advanced US fighters such as the F-35 and F-22, did not even appear in the battle. Russian ballistic missiles were not successful enough, while Russian cruise missiles were shot down by heroic Ukrainians, even with machine guns. Russian S300 air defense missiles are being destroyed by Ukraine one by one. The Ukrainian armed forces, on the other hand, took advantage of the situation and started to seize all opportunities. Some weapons sent by the USA and the Western allies changed the course of the war. Ukrainian heroes used Western weapons really well. In the process, a new beast has joined the Ukrainian army, the M982 Excalibur. M982 Excalibur, which was sent to the Ukrainian armed forces with 1,000 units from the USA and 500 units from Canada, was put into the integration process by Ukrainian weapons engineers. The cost of one of these cannonballs, which can be easily adapted to the Ukrainian army, is over $200,000 and is currently one of the most popular destructive military equipment. The reason why Excalibur is so expensive compared to a cannonball is its high success rate. The Ukrainian artillery units proved this once again. Using extended-range guided missiles, this Terminator has achieved a success that will shake the Russian agenda. Ukrainian heroic artillery units blew up the Russian army's ammunition depot in Kharkiv, where the famous S-300 missiles were located. The M982 Excalibur extended-range guided missiles used by the Ukrainian artillery in the attack turned the Russian headquarters in Kharkiv, including the S-300 missiles, into a hell. When the Ukrainian attacks began, the soldiers at the Russian headquarters only tried to save their lives in shock. This operation, which dealt a heavy blow to the Russians, was appreciated by the President of Ukraine, Zelensky. Zelensky stated that these counterattacks will continue at full speed until the entire territory of the country is taken back, emphasizing how determined Ukraine is in the war. There was no statement from the Kremlin administration and Russian leader Putin after Ukraine dropped bombs on Kharkiv. Vladimir Putin, who has not broken his silence for a long time, is expected to set a new route with the increasing losses of the Russian army. But with the Ukrainian military's military equipment assistance from the United States and its Western allies, any move by Putin seems unlikely to succeed. For a long time, the M982 Excalibur guided missiles sent by the USA and Canada seemed to be on the agenda. The M982 Excalibur, which managed to show its effects very seriously in test shots of the Ukrainian armed forces, may pose a greater threat to the Russian army in the future. Russian leader Vladimir Putin is currently unable to provide any reinforcements to the Russian army, unlike the one provided to the Ukrainian army by the West. The latest Kharkiv disaster has also bothered the Russian soldiers. Many of the personnel of the Russian armed forces have now lost their faith in the war. Russian soldiers even started to flee from the Ukrainian front due to the daily news of disappearances. A remarkable incident occurred at a Russian base located around the Russian headquarters in Kharkiv, where the latest Ukrainian attacks took place. Soldiers at another Russian base in Kharkiv, about 20 kilometers from the Russian base, set off for the headquarters where the incident took place as soon as they heard about the explosions in Kharkiv. Reaching the Russian headquarters after 20 kilometers, these soldiers were ecstatic at the sight they saw. A Russian soldier in their group allegedly killed himself in shock. There was no news from the other soldiers in the group after this incident. These Russian soldiers are thought to have fled the battlefield because they saw the Russian headquarters after the bombardment. However, there is no definite information about their fate. The case is keeping its secret. The fact that neither of the Russian administration nor the leader Vladimir Putin has taken any action for the disintegration of the Russian army day by day is getting on the nerves. It leads to a greater political complications as Putin tries to hide Russian losses in the war. Especially during the 2 months of the war, the Russian leader, who showed much less loss of soldiers in the Russian army by using the Russian media, also made the Russian media channels give up. Some Russian media outlets admitted that Russian forces were in a tough fight on Ukrainian soil after the M982 Excalibur disaster. The first news, which created a bombshell effect on the Russian agenda, was almost a reaction to Putin and his administration. Ukrainian President Zelensky delivered a speech after the recent Kharkiv victory. Zelensky said, "I would like to thank once again all our defenders, our soldiers and women soldiers, our intelligence, the security service of Ukraine, who are doing everything to make it harder and harder for the invaders to stay in Ukraine. And today I sincerely appreciate the struggle of our artillery brigade, which destroyed the Russian warehouse where the invaders took the S300 missiles to bombard Kharkiv with their accurate shots." He expressed dissatisfaction with his words, but Zelensky stressed that more equipped weapons like the M982 Excalibur should come from the US and other Western allies. Zelensky described the weapons and financial support of the USA and its Western allies as steps that will shorten the war process.